Hello, thank you for joining in today's session. Today I'm going to cover India criminal searches. I'm going to give you a complete breakdown of what are the options, what are the sources, and how criminal searches in India are done. It's a longer session, would require about 20 to 25 minutes of your time today. My name is Sachin Agarwal and I'm from AMS Inform. So let's get right into it. So, in a quick agenda today, we're going to talk about quick facts about India. We're going to look at a definition of what criminal searches mean. We're going to look at what the searching requirements are. We're going to hit on the biggest question that everybody has is, what is a hit and how do you identify a hit? We're going to look at various sources of criminal checks today. In detail, we're going to look at each exhibit representing each type of source of criminal check. We're going to look at a process flow, and we're going to do a quick comparison of all the sources of criminal checks in a tabular format. And finally, we'll do a recap on the session today. So let's go get into the quick facts about India. This is the idea behind giving you quick facts is that it gives you a little flavor of the country, how big the country is, and how complex the country is. It's the seventh largest in size, right after Russia, Canada, China, US, Brazil, and Australia. We are the second largest populated country in the world. At the same time, we support more than 25 official languages. We follow a common law legal system whose infrastructure bears the influence of British colonial rule. The way the judicial system is split, we have a highest appellate court in judiciary, which is called as the Supreme Court of India. Then we have high courts, which are the highest court in each state. And then we have subordinate criminal and civil courts across each state. Just to put numbers out there, there are 39 high court complexes, about 4.37 million cases which are pending. I think these stats are for 2019. District and taluk courts, or the subordinate courts, are 3,103 courts, in which there are about 30 million court cases which are still pending. If you look at police stations in India, there are about 15,579 police stations in India, and this figure is as on 2017. What you see, the map of India, it's a new map of India, which was published by Government of India. The latest split that happened in the state of Jammu Kashmir is depicted on the northern part of India, the topmost, where now the state has been divided into two parts, where there's a new region called Ladakh, and the other region as Jammu and Kashmir. Now let's look at what is the current scenario that is happening in India. Now, India is in a very aggressive push toward digitization. Our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has a vision of Digital India to transform India into a digitally empowered society. Government has also formulated a new Personal Data Protection Bill of 2018 in regards to that. Government is also encouraging various departments towards providing efficient internet services and technology delivered via internet. So one of the key examples of projects that Government of India undertaken, one is the e-court system, the complete revamp of the Department of Justice. Then if you look at police services, because we are talking about courts and police in this presentation, we have e-court system I talked about. Then we have EFIRs, in which all the police stations are supposed to publish their first information report onto the platform for citizens to view it. There are certain mechanisms as how you can access the data, but you can still look at the EFIRs, and also issuing police clearance certificates online. In some states, the process is very seamless, where you need to just input, provide basic details, pay the fee, and in a certain time frame, you would get police clearance certificates delivered to you in your email box. So let's see, what does a criminal or a police record means, or what does definition means? It's a straightforward definition. A criminal record or a police record is record of person's criminal history. It's pretty straightforward. There is no qualms about it. Now, what information do we have? Or what is the documentation that we have in order to run a criminal check? So there are 6 types of IDs which exist in India. There's a driver's license, there's a PAN card, a voter's ID card, a passport, and our latest addition is Aadhaar card and ration card. Now, number 6 item, ration card, is something that is now being issued only to families which falls under BPL or below poverty line. So for all practical purposes, items 1 to 5 are the common forms of an ID which are available. And now if you look at the information that's available on each form of an ID, if you combine them together, then we have common denominator of the following fields. That is the name of the candidate, date of birth, address, father's name, and starting 2018, the passports in India would have mother's name in case of a single mother raising a child. Now that was a huge change that came across in 2018. But if you only look at the common denominators, we have name, date of birth, address, and father's name. Now, you as a customer, you have a biggest issue. The issues are, how do you identify what is a hit? What is a criminal record? And the biggest challenge when you are running a criminal record is providing addresses. When your partner asks for you, hey, can you please provide me an address? A lot of times, candidate would give you either the incomplete address or a mixed up address. How do you identify a hit? What is a criminal record? What kind of information is available when somebody says there is a hit against the candidate? And how would you identify a hit? Was there a name match? Was there a father's name match? Was there an address match? Was there a date of birth match? Was there any kind of unique ID to make sure the candidate that we are doing a background check on is the same one on which you found a hit? What all documentation, court summaries, order summaries, whatever information that's available, and how quickly can you get it? Now, these are some of the questions that, as a customer, you would always have in your mind while running criminal searches in India. And our aim is to answer some of the questions or all of them as we move forward in this presentation. So first, let's look at what are the type of sources. Now, it is important to know, understand that each type of the source that we have today have their own jurisdiction. And providing a complete address goes a very long way in making sure that we are doing a correct check. For a criminal or a police record, the sources are two major sources. One is going through the police to find the record, or going to the courts to find the record. Now, once you go to the police, starting from top, the police gets divided into two separate sources. One is by doing a physical police station visit and checking in the records whether there is any kind of criminal records against the candidate on that address or not. Now, police station has a certain jurisdiction over a certain area, certain geographic region. That's why in the starting I said, each source has its own jurisdiction. Similarly, you can apply for a PCC, that is called Police Clearance Certificate, or a character certificate, which is done by sending a request to the police by post, or in some cases applying for such kind of documents on the police websites, depending upon which state's police department has acquired that technology to provide services to their citizens. Now, coming down to second main source, that is the court records. So when we have court records, there are three ways of doing the court record search. One is to the law firm, one is to a physical court visit, and finally a database search which aggregates data from different courts and publishes them online so that you can make a search in a quick and easy manner. So again, we have 5 sources in total. We have a police station visit. We can request for a PCC or a character certificate. You can go through a law firm. You can do a court visit, or you can do a database search. Now let's look at a process flow. Now this is a process flow for a police check, how a police check would happen. Starting from left, a background screening company would send a letter of request to the police station. Now this letter of request would depend upon whatever address the candidate has provided. Based on that address that candidate provides, research is done on the jurisdiction of the police station on that address. And after that, a letter is sent to the superintendent of police. Superintendent of police will further direct that letter to the local police station which has jurisdiction over that specific address. Now, the police station would do two things at the same time. They can either send a police report based on their records, or they would ask one of their field officer or one of their beat officer to make a home visit to check on the candidate's house, in which they would do a complete visit of the house. They would knock the door, they will talk to the owners of the house. They would also make visit to the neighbors to get some information on the character of the candidate. And then they would come back and submit their report in the police. Police department would look at the report, and then either police can send the report back directly to the background screening company, or they can report it back to the superintendent of police, and superintendent of police office department would finally dispatch the report back to the background screening company. Now this process, though sounds on paper very straightforward, but it's a very, very long process. This process can take anywhere from 10 days to a year, depending upon what type of police station that you have reached out to, whether the police station is in a tier 1 city, tier 2 city, or tier 3 city. Does the police station is even aware about the process of doing a criminal check on a candidate when it's requested by a background screening company? And because police have other work as well, depending upon state to state and time of the year, it is not necessary that police department would focus solely on the request that you have sent, and you will get a reply in a timely manner. Now let's look at the process flow of court records. Now what you see on your screen is a pretty complex. It looks like a complex process, but it's pretty straightforward. Let me break it down for you. So when a complaint is made in a court, now it can be a cognizable offense or it can be a non-cognizable offense. So a cognizable offense is similar to a felony in US, and a non-cognizable offense is similar to a misdemeanor. Now let's look at the first on the top part, where it's a cognizable offense. When it's a cognizable offense, a complaint can go directly to the police, or a complainant can go directly to the magistrate as well. Now when it goes to the police files an FIR and does the investigation. Once the investigation gets completed, they frame charges. After the framing charges, then it becomes a court case, a trial is run, there's a judgment, and then there's appeal process if somebody is not happy with the judgment. When you move down, we have a magistrate. A magistrate would frame charges. The charges, after that, they will advise the police to do their investigation. After that, there's a trial, there's a judgment, and further there's an appeal. When we move to a non-cognizable offense, which is similar to a misdemeanor, a police submits a NCR report to the magistrate, or non-cognizable offense report to the magistrate. Based on the report, magistrate decides whether a warrant has to be issued or there is no warrant to be required. If there's a warrant issued, then police then takes over. They file an FIR, they frame charges, they does the investigation, and then it follows a similar process like others that we talk about. There's a trial, then there's a judgment, and finally there's an appeal if somebody is not happy with the process. So this gives you a very top level view of how a complaint in a court, which can be a cognizable offense or a non-cognizable offense, becomes a registered complaint, and how a police or a magistrate gets involved, and how it becomes a court case, and how it moves to the flow of its trial. Now, when we look at, you might ask, what is a cognizable offense types and what are non-cognizable offense types? So we're talking about felony or cognizable offense. It can be murder, rape, dowry, theft, criminal breach of trust, unnatural offenses. And when we're talking about non-cognizable offenses or misdemeanor offenses, they can be assault, cheating, forgery, defamation. So these are the type of cases which would typically get covered in these court records. Now let's look at exhibits on 5 sources that we talked about. So the first source was police verification or local police visits. Now it's completely a verbal check. It's a very, very localized record because it's jurisdiction based. Somebody would visit the police station, they would request the beat officer to look into the records register based on just the name and address of the candidate, and they would just provide verbal confirmation whether there is a criminal record against that candidate in that police station or not. There is no exhibit around it because it's a verbal confirmation. Now let's look at a police clearance certificate. What you see on your screen is a certificate that has been issued by Delhi Police. It's a very straightforward process. You have to have a copy of the ID of the document of the candidate with the provided address on it, a color photo of the candidate as well, complete address. A letter has to be uploaded from a background screening company, and a police fee has to be paid. Once you complete all that information, police has anywhere from 25 to 30 working days to send you a reply. And the format, what you see on the screen, is standard format, which is published on the police website. You get a notification by an email that a PCC has been generated, and you can simply go and download the certificate. This is another example of a character and antecedent verification. The example that you see is for a police in Goa. Goa is a union territory. So the input required for this kind of certificate to be issued, or this kind of letter to be issued, is providing complete address, and a letter from background screening company is sent to the police station, and after receiving the documents or receiving the request, the police station would follow their own process, and once they have done their due diligence, they would issue this letter back to us. The third source is a law firm. Now, in a law firm, what we typically do is you would provide details of the candidate, that is the name of the candidate, the address of the candidate, and you would request a law firm to do a criminal check on them. Law firms have their own resources, they have their field staff, they would have access to mix of databases and things like that, and they would typically do a similar kind of work where they would either make a field visit or they will use multiple resources to provide information. They will capture all the information and they will issue a document on their stationery confirming the criminal records of the candidate, whether there's any kind of record or not, and they would also list out typically the courts that they have searched. Now, the fourth way is doing the court visit, physical court visit, where one can physically go to the court. If they are disposed of cases, those are the only cases where you can actually review the files and review the case details. If there is any case which is a hit case and it's in process, only the lawyers of the case, lawyers of the petitioner or lawyers of the deponent or respondent can get the certified court copies from the court. So the example what you see is a form that has to be filled out in a Delhi court where you would list out details of the case number, and who the judge is and when was the order date. And once you have given out all that information, you would be provided with a certified court document. So what you see on the screen right now is the top sheet of the certified copy, where there will be a court name, court stamp, there will be a stamp, the duty that has been paid, ₹10, date of request and the date of receiving of the request, and that is how you would receive your court certified cases. And finally, you have database searches. That is the fifth source of verification. Now, the way database searches work is there are a lot of few services where they aggregate data from different e-courts in India. There is an e-court site published by the Department of Justice where you can actually just search based on name of the court and location, case type. You can search based on case number, case status, who the petitioner, respondent. It will give you information about charges which have been framed. It will give you information about police stations and if there are any kind of FIRs and any history of case hearings. Now, this type of check is fairly a quick check, and it gives you lots and lots of information which you would otherwise have to visit the court and get it. Now, let's look at the process flow again. As you remember, we saw this thing in our previous screen, and let's try and put all the sources back into this process flow and see in which step, on each step where this process flow has their effect on and which category they fall on. So let's see. So we had 5 different sources. Let's start with one. The first one was police visit. The second was getting a PCC or a police clearance certificate. Number 3 was law firm. Number 4 was the physical court visit, and number 5 was databases. So if you follow the red boxes and the big rectangle box around it, you will see number 1, that is where the police, number 1 source. So till here you can get the information. Number 2 is PCC, or applying for a police clearance certificate. Till the time police is filing the FIR or they do investigation, they are allowed to provide that information to the PCC. If it is a law firm would get you a lot of information up to the trial. Number 4 is court visits. You can get the judgment copies, but again, you are limited to the fact that only judgment copies are available. Any in-process cases or ongoing trial cases, you will not be able to get any details. And number 5 sits on the top, that is the database checks. It has a view of the entire chain of actions. They can get the police station details, you get the FIR details, you get the charges which are framed, you also get the trial details, you get judgment copies, and if there are any further appeals, you get that information as well. So this gives you a complete holistic view of all the sources, how they are working, and in which stages you would be able to use them very effectively. Remember, all these sources are valid sources. We are not saying that none of the source is not valid, but each of the sources have their own pros and cons and reach based on their jurisdiction, based on how they work and how the information is sought from them. Now let's look at a quick comparison based on them as how they frame out. So we have a comparison between police check, police clearance certificate, law firms, court visit, and database checks. The criteria is a minimum search criteria, name and address, turnaround time, reliability, proof of search, whether there is a hit or not, whether we can get a proof of that or not, and how invasive they are, whether the candidate gets involved in it. So if you look at a tabular format here, we can see that police check has two red boxes. That means that they have a low reliability and is definitely invasive, because in a police check, police might send a beat officer to the candidate's house. Nobody wants a police to in front of their house. So here candidate gets involved or the candidate's family gets involved. Number two is police clearance certificate. Again, minimum search criteria of name and address is not enough. Lot of documentation is required in order to use that source. The turnaround time is about 30 days, and it is invasive because there will be a visit from the police station to the candidate's house. When we look at law firm, because law firms are using multiple sources, including field staff, the turnaround time is still high in getting replies from them. A court visit. In a court visit, a minimum search criteria of name and address is not enough, because they require court name, the case number, the judge name, the date when the case started, and other details in order to pull out the court case files. The turnaround time is very high and reliability is very high, but at the same time you can only get results on cases which are disposed of, or there has been some kind of judgment on those cases. In process cases, you cannot get any certified court copies. Now let's look at final database check. It meets the minimum search criteria requirement. The turnaround time is pretty low. The reliability is very, very high. There is a proof of search that's available, and there is no candidate involved. There is no visit to the candidate's house, and at this point, database search becomes a very highly preferable source of information. But at the same time, all other searches serve their purpose, and depending upon what is your requirement, what is the requirement of your client, you can choose the source that fits your best requirement and need. Now let's see how to identify a hit. There is always a name match, which can be a partial or a full or close name match. There can be an address match, full or partial or a close address match. Father's name, mother's name, or spouse match. Now that can be done based on the passport copy or based on other set of ID documents that are provided. Now the most ideal document in order to match that details is passport, because at the back side of the passport, typically there is father's name, mother's name, and if somebody is married and they've updated their passport, then there would be a spouse name as well. Age match from date of birth. That's another way of matching the records, where in a lot of court case files you would find candidate's date of birth listed there, or as on date it is mentioned there. And if we already have a date of birth on the records, then it's easy to match what is the age of the candidate. The other matching criteria are not available. There are only 4 matching criteria: name, address, immediate family members match. For example, father's name, mother's name, or spouse. There is no brother's name match. There is no sister's name match, because none of the IDs do not mention father's or sister's name and brother's names. Only spouse, mother, and father. There's no other criteria matching. There is no ID type that's mentioned on a criminal case, on a court records. No PAN number, no Aadhaar number, no voter's ID number, no passport number. These documents get only mentioned if any of these documents were used in a certain type of category of offense, and there was a need to mention these IDs in a court records. Otherwise, these type of identification documents are not used. But we can use such type of documents and information available on these documents to find a close match or a full absolute match on the name, address, father's name, mother's name, spouse name, on age of the candidate. So let's do a quick recap. Default information is only enough for a certain type of sources. As we looked at all the 5 sources, name plus address, which is typically available for all background screening companies, for do a criminal check on, it's only applicable for a certain sources. For other sources, you need much more information, which typically is not easy to get. All sources are valid type of criminal searches. Each source has its own process and certain limitations, as we just looked at the comparison chart. So based on what is a requirement, you can always choose the source which fits your criteria. Always try and provide complete address to your service provider. It is of utmost important. If you provide incorrect address or mixed up addresses, that is only going to give you a wrong output or incorrect information. Your service provider is dependent upon you and the candidate to provide them the correct information. The more number of addresses of the candidate, the better it is. That gives you a really good quality of search. Always remember, some sources are going to be invasive of candidate, especially for police check and PCC. There will be a police visit to the candidate's house. No background screening company can control that. Your service provider does not make a visit to the candidate's house. It is the police that is making a visit to the candidate's house. Your provider is not responsible for these things, and there's many occasions where police beat officer might visit candidate's house in plain clothes. Sometimes they are allowed to make plain clothes visits. Sometimes they are doing visits while they are themselves going back home. So your background screening companies are not responsible for any kind of police visits. Finally, always identify a partner who can assist you with hit cases. Transparent about the source information. Your partner should be subject matter expert. They should be able to support you in each and every form. It is not necessary that every check that you get has to be a clear check. If there is a hit, they should be able to provide you a support. They should be transparent about what sources they searched, how they searched, and they should have that subject matter information so that they can educate you and your client and also support you in any manner what is required. So that brings to my end of complete breakdown on Indian criminal searches. I hope you would have enjoyed this session. Kindly share your feedback and comments and write to me at verify@amsinform.com. And if you have any other suggestions or any topic that you want me to cover, please let us know. I would be more than happy to talk about it in my next session. I hope you enjoyed it today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.